Welcome, listeners from across the world, to another episode of the Light Up Podcast. I'm your host, Alice, and today we're diving into part 1A of episode 3 to discover the zesty lime and lemon legacy. Yes, you heard right, lime and lemon. So, get ready for a tangy adventure as we explore the history, economy, politics, language, fashion, and culture of these beautiful citrus gems. By the way, if you enjoy my content, please follow my channel on Spotify and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. You can also share my podcast if you know someone who would also enjoy learning. Gracias, merci, voila, spasiba, sehr, obrigada, grazie. Now, for those of you who do not know the difference between a lime and a lemon, well, limes are the fruits of trees that seldom grows more than 16 feet in height and can become shrub-like if not pruned. The branches of a lime tree are spread irregularly, with short, stiff twigs that have small leaves and many sharp, pointed thorns that vary in size along the lime tree's branches and trunk. These thorns protect the lime tree from damage and also discourage animals and humans from accessing the tree's lime fruits. Now, if you're wondering how sharp the thorns of lime trees can be, well, the thorns on some varieties of lime trees can be as sharp as needles. Yes, needles, since they can easily puncture skin if touched. This means that people always need to be very careful when harvesting limes from these prickly types of lime trees. The evergreen leaves of lime trees have a pale green color, and the small, delicate, white-colored flowers are usually borne in clusters. The lime fruit itself is usually green and has a thin peel. Limes can grow up to 3 or 4 centimeters in size, and when they become ripe, the peel changes to a yellowish green color. When compared to lemons, most limes have a more tart or bitter flavor, since limes have a higher content of acid and sugar. However, some varieties of lime are so lacking in citric acid that they are called sweet limes. Perhaps you may have heard about them since they grow in many subtropical and tropical regions around the world. Now, let's move on to lemons, which are the fruits of an evergreen spreading bush or small tree that can grow up to 10 or even 20 feet in height if not pruned. The young oval-shaped leaves of lemon trees have a reddish tinted color that changes to green as the leaves become more mature. Some lemon tree varieties also have sharp thorns at the axils of the leaves. Where exactly are these axils located on plants? Well, imagine the axil of a plant as a secret chamber of potential for new growth, tucked away at the point where a leaf meets a stem or where a leaf meets a branch. In the case of lime and lemon plants, this tiny, often overlooked nook is actually a powerhouse of growth and renewal, because within each axil lies the possibility for new branches, leaves, or blossoms to emerge, where each new growth highlights a testament to the plant's relentless pursuit of sunlight, air, and life. Each new bud, shoot, or flower is a chance for the plant to capture more light, spread its genetic legacy through seeds, or allure pollinators. The existence of axils is a masterstroke of natural design, which showcases how critical functions can be nestled into the smallest of spaces. As silent witnesses to the cycles of growth and rebirth, axils play a pivotal role in the plant's life, harboring the keys to its future expansion and survival. In the diverse tapestry of the world's climates and seasons, axils in plants are silent architects because it is axils that shape the natural environment through their pivotal role in growth and adaptation. In the temperate bloom of spring, axils burst forth with new buds and shoots, weaving a vibrant canopy that shelters and nurtures the ecosystem below. During the relentless heat of tropical summers, axils produce the dense foliage we see, which offers crucial shade and moisture retention. While in cooler climates, axils are the genesis of autumn's fiery palette, preparing plants for the dormancy of winter. Even in the harshest deserts and tundras, axils contribute to the sparse but resilient vegetation that forms the backbone of those ecosystems. Through the cyclical interplay of budding, growth, and flowering, axils not only dictate the rhythm of plant life across different climates, but also sculpt the broader landscape, influencing the biodiversity and ecological dynamics that sustain the planet. The beautiful flowers of lemon trees have a sweet fragrance which also contains nectar. What exactly is nectar? Well, nectar is a substance primarily found in the nectaries of plants. These nectaries are most commonly located within flowers. However, plants can also have extra floral nectaries located on its leaves, stems, or petioles, which are the stalks of leaves. Nectaries contain specialized glands that produce and secrete a sweet liquid called nectar, which serves to attract pollinators like bees to help in pollination, which is a process that is vital for plant reproduction and also for creating the foods we eat, making nectar an essential ingredient for healthy ecosystems and sustainable food chains globally. The flowers of lemon trees can grow individually along a branch or grow on a stem as a solitary flower. They can also grow in clusters with multiple lemon flowers attached to the same stem or the same branch. Lemons are oval-shaped, and the inner fleshy part of the fruit, known as the pulp, forms 8 to 10 segments, while limes have 10 to 12 segments. And when lemons are growing, they are noticeably acidic in nature, and the outer peel has a green color, which is prominently dotted with hundreds of oil glands in some varieties. These oil glands are responsible for producing the essential oils that give lemons their characteristic flavor and fragrance. When lemons become ripe and ready for harvest, they change to yellow in color, and it is this yellow layer of lemon peels which is called the rind or the zest. Inside the inner part of lemon peels is a white-colored layer located between the outer yellow rind and the juicy fruit inside the lemon. This white spongy layer is called the mesocarp or the albedo, and more commonly called the pith, which most of us discard after using the juice or flesh of the lemon. But did you know that even though lemon piths can either be nearly tasteless or slightly bitter in flavor, they are actually quite versatile and very beneficial because they contain high amounts of vitamins, minerals, and fiber? See, lemon piths also contain a substance called pectin. And what exactly is pectin, you may wonder? Well, pectin is the substance found in the cell walls of plants and provides the structure and rigidity to give plants the support to tissues such as the flesh of fruits, peels, cores, and stems. It is pectin that helps plants defend against diseases by creating barriers to stop harmful invaders and ultimately keeps plants healthy and thriving. Pectin also influences the texture of fruits, making them firmer or softer as they ripen. So, pectin plays a crucial role by acting as a structural carbohydrate to help maintain the integrity and structure of the walls of plant cells and acts like glue to hold them together, enabling the plant cells to maintain their shape and also stay strong, connected, and hydrated. These characteristics make pectin extremely important to our food industry because it serves as a natural gelling agent, thickener, and stabilizer in a wide range of products, making pectin a versatile compound used in various industries such as food, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics. For example, pectin is crucial in the production of jams, jellies, and marmalades since pectin helps to create the desired gel-like consistency. And pectin is used in fruit juices, dairy products, desserts, and confectionaries such as candies and sweets, chocolates, chewing gum, pastries, ice creams, and other sweet confections and baked goods to improve texture and stability, ensure even suspension of ingredients, and enhance mouthfeel. The natural origin and dietary fiber of pectin also makes it an important ingredient in health-conscious and vegetarian products to align with consumer demands for cleaner, more natural products since pectin acts as a thickener, gelling agent, and emulsifier. In fact, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, the pith of lemon peels is the main source used for commercial grades of pectin and commonly used as a gelling agent for preparing food items such as jams, jellies, and preserves, including as a thickener for sauces, fillings, and desserts. Now, let's explore the rich history of these acidic citrus fruits, which are known for their vibrant flavor and also their numerous health benefits. Did you know that limes and lemons have been cultivated for thousands of years? According to an April 2016 article titled Phylogenetic Origin of Limes and Lemons Revealed by Cytoplasmic and Nuclear Markers on the Origin of Limes and Lemons by the Annals of Botany, which is an Oxford academic peer-reviewed scientific journal, the origin of limes and lemons remains unknown and controversial, so these fruits have been a source of conflicting taxonomic opinions, meaning that there's no agreement on the origin of limes and lemons. However, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, Wild limes probably originated in the Indonesian archipelago in Asia. Later, Arabian traders may have taken limes and lemons from India to the eastern Mediterranean countries and Africa thousands of years ago. During the 12th and 13th centuries, these citrus fruits were introduced to the western Mediterranean countries and throughout Europe by the returning crusaders who found them growing in the Middle East. And who were these returning crusaders? Well, the returning crusaders were European Christians who participated in the Crusades through military expeditions launched by the Roman Catholic Church to regain control of Jerusalem and other holy sites in the Holy Land from Muslim rule in the Middle Ages. After participating in these campaigns, the returning crusaders were individuals who returned to their homelands in Europe. An interesting fact stated by Encyclopedia Britannica is that Christopher Columbus took citrus seeds, which probably included limes, to the West Indies on his second voyage in the year 1493, where these citrus plants found the most favorable growing conditions in the warm subtropical climates with well-drained soil and plenty of sunshine. And for those of you who do not know, the West Indies is a region in the Caribbean, consisting of a large group of islands located between the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea, and near the southeastern coast of North America. Soon, the lime trees became widely distributed in the West Indies, Mexico, and Florida. Eventually, during the following year, in 1494, lemons were being cultivated in the Azores, which at the time was a group of Portuguese-controlled islands in the Atlantic Ocean, where lemons were then harvested and shipped to England during the Age of Exploration and subsequent periods. Both limes and lemons were then adopted into the local cuisines and also used in gardening due to their superb characteristics for bringing out the flavor of foods. Now, let's explore the economy of these limes and lemons in the 18th and 19th centuries, since the citrus trade influenced significant economies from the Mediterranean to the Americas. Did you know that limes and lemons were considered to be as valuable as gold? Well, if not, you should know that in the 19th century, limes and lemons were so valuable that they earned the nickname green gold, mainly because of their crucial role in preventing scurvy, a deadly disease which was caused by a vitamin C deficiency and was prevalent among sailors during their long sea voyages. So how and why was scurvy a problem for sailors, you may ask? Well, according to a 2017 article titled The Age of Scurvy by the Distillations magazine, which is published by the Science History Institute, during the 18th and early 19th centuries, sailors like Thomas Urquhart faced numerous dangers at sea, including the dreaded press gangs who forcibly enlisted men into the British Navy. And what exactly were these press gangs? Well, press gangs were groups of men employed by naval authorities in various countries, and their primary task was to forcibly enlist individuals into the naval service. According to information published about press gangs from the UK Parliament, press gangs were well known for the physical force they used in recruiting men into the Royal Navy during the 17th and 18th centuries. However, it was a practice which Parliament had first sanctioned several centuries earlier. But, in time of war, impressment, as the practice was called, was also a tactic employed by the army to acquire extra men, and usually used when the non-violent methods of the recruiting sergeants failed to enlist sufficient numbers. During periods of naval impressment, the Crown claimed a permanent right to seize men of seafaring experience for the Royal Navy, and the practice was at various times given parliamentary authority. Impressment was vigorously enforced during the naval wars of the 18th century by acts passed in the 1700s. And the men pressed into service were usually sailors in the merchant fleets, but might just as often be ordinary apprentices and laborers. During the wars with France, from the years 1793 to 1815, an impress service operated in British coastal towns, although further laws passed in 1835, which upheld the power to impress, in practice, fell into disuse after the year 1815. And for army recruiting during the 18th century, public perception of standing armies as instruments of despotic government obliged Parliament to keep Britain's peacetime forces as small as possible. However, there were times when involvement in continental and colonial wars made it necessary for Parliament to legislate hastily for the speedy recruitment of vast additional forces. In the case of the sailor Thomas Iroquois, just imagine one summer evening in the year 1808, while on a stroll through London with his wife and sister-in-law, he was accosted by a stranger who wanted to know his name. Thomas was outraged and demanded to know by what right did the man who questioned him have. Except 3 or 4 men seized him, smacked him on the head, and dragged him along the street. In a letter, Thomas wrote about the assault, stating that they tore my coat from my back and afterwards pulled me by my neck for 50 yards until life was nearly exhausted. Fortunately for Thomas, passers-by intervened and the attackers fled. But unfortunately, Thomas's experience was far from unique. This is because in the 18th and early 19th centuries, fishermen and merchant seamen like him lived in fear of the press gangs who roamed the nighttime streets, searching for victims to impress into the British Navy. Whether English, Irish, American, or Canadian, any subject of the British Empire with seafaring experience was vulnerable to abduction. If the gang that attacked Thomas had succeeded, he likely would have awoken trapped on a ship and with nearly no hope of escape. So, by the time he returned home, if he even returned home, that is, he would have endured storms, battles, fevers, and years away from family and friends. But of all the horrors faced by sailors at the time, one of the greatest threats had nothing to do with pirates or wars or weather. It had to do with food. Because their greatest threat was to them a mysterious and deadly disease called scurvy. See, according to the article titled Finding the Cure for Scurvy from the Naval History magazine, which is published by the U.S. Naval Institute, during the Age of Sail, oceanic voyages were perilous due to the high inaccuracy of charts, with navigation technology at the time being primitive both in its design and functionality. Imagine, even dangerous weather was a threat to the sailors since severe weather could appear at any time without warning. So this means that compared to our modern navigation and weather forecasting technologies, the methods used for navigation during the Age of Sail were relatively imprecise and limited in their ability to provide accurate and detailed information about a ship's location and course in the vast ocean, which covers about 71% of the Earth's surface, making it the planet's largest biome. In terms of area, the ocean equates to approximately 362 million square kilometers, which is about 140 million square miles. It has a volume of 1.332 billion cubic kilometers and an average depth of 3,688 meters, or 12,100 feet, with the deepest point being the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, reaching down to approximately 10,994 meters, or 36,070 feet deep. Imagine, during the Age of Sail, which was roughly the period during the 16th to the mid-19th century, the ocean was considered to be the most dangerous and riskiest place to work for several compelling reasons. Let's explore them. Reason 1 is getting lost. Without modern GPS or maps, sailors often didn't know exactly where they were, which made it easy for them to get lost or crash into unseen land. These navigational challenges were due to a lack of modern navigational instruments and accurate maps. See, sailors often ventured into the unknown, increasing their risk of being harmed by shipwrecks on uncharted reefs or coasts. Reason 2 is bad weather. See, huge storms could come out of nowhere, causing severe damage to ships or causing them to sink. During severe weather, ships were vulnerable to extreme weather conditions, including storms and hurricanes, which could lead to catastrophic damage or sinking without any warning. Reason 3 is sickness. This was because being on a ship for months meant that sailors were not getting enough fresh fruits and vegetables, which led to them having scurvy. Plus, diseases spread quickly in the tight living quarters, so sailors experienced health issues along with other illnesses that spread rapidly in the cramped, unsanitary conditions aboard ships. Reason 4 is pirates. Yes, pirates were real and could attack ships to steal their cargo, which often led to violent encounters. See, piracy and conflict on the high seas were rife with piracy and maritime conflicts, with ships being frequently attacked for their cargo, leading to loss of life and goods. Reason 5 is hard work. This is simply because the work was tough, physically demanding, and often dangerous due to the manual labor and numerous safety hazards. See, climbing up high sails or handling heavy ropes could lead to sailors getting serious injuries or even falling overboard, especially during severe weather. Additionally, falling from rigging, accidents with equipment, and other occupational hazards were quite common with little to no medical care available. Reason 6 is no help nearby. Imagine if something went wrong, like an injury or the ship started sinking, there was no one around to help. Sailors were on their own until they could reach land. If they even reached land, that is. See, isolation was common because once at sea, ships were isolated from the rest of the world. In cases of emergency, help was far away, if help was even available, that is, making survival in crises precarious. And reason 7 is no way to call for help. During the age of sail, there were no radios or phones, so if sailors encountered danger, they could not call for help or warn others about danger. This limited communication left sailors without the ability to communicate over long distances, so ships could not call for help, nor report their position, nor receive warnings about dangers ahead. These factors combined to make working at sea during the age of sail extremely perilous for sailors who could experience a high risk of death, disease, or injury for those who made their living on the vast open ocean. Yet, scurvy was so much more devastating than these reasons that the disease is estimated to have killed more than 2 million sailors between the time of Columbus's transatlantic voyage and the rise of steam engines in the mid-19th century. In fact, the problem was so common that ship owners and governments assumed a 50% death rate for their sailors by default just from scurvy during major voyages, since on a lengthy voyage the loss of half the crew was common, and in extreme cases it was much worse. According to historian Stephen Bown, scurvy was responsible for more deaths at sea than storms, shipwrecks, combat, and all other diseases combined. In fact, scurvy was so devastating that the search for a cure became what Stephen describes as a vital factor determining the destiny of nations. The symptoms of scurvy were horrific and quite insidious, beginning with mild symptoms with sufferers reporting malaise and sore joints, extreme lethargy and weakness, followed by swollen limbs, bleeding gums, internal hemorrhaging, even their teeth and hair fell out and old wounds reopened. As stated in the Distillations magazine's article describing the age of scurvy, none of the potential fates awaiting sailors was pleasant, but scurvy exacted a particularly gruesome death. The earliest symptom, lethargy, was so intense that people once believed laziness was a cause of the disease is debilitating. Your body feels weak, your joints ache, your arms and legs swell, and your skin bruises at the slightest touch. As the disease progresses, your gums become spongy and your breath fetid, your teeth loosen and internal hemorrhaging makes splotches on your skin. Old wounds reopen, mucous membranes bleed. Left untreated, you will die likely from a sudden hemorrhage near your heart or brain. Without treatment, the victims of scurvy often experienced a steady decline towards a painful and gruesome death, causing so much suffering that it left its victims helpless and hopeless. The article further describes the story of a survivor written by an unknown surgeon on a 16th century English voyage that reveals the horror of the disease. The survivor's story, for some of you, might be quite gruesome and shocking to hear about, so I will not share it here, but in it the surgeon writes, "Many of our people died of it every day, and we saw bodies thrown into the sea constantly, 3 or 4 at a time." But despite the horrors faced by sailors, the search for a cure for scurvy was very slow and quite challenging. This is because, despite the many efforts to find a cure for scurvy, 18th century science was ill-equipped for the challenge. Why is this, you may ask? See, during the 18th century, medicine was dominated by an ancient idea which was developed by ancient Greek physicians and philosophers, called the theory of the four humors, that was used to explain how the human body works and why people get sick. With Hippocrates often credited as its originator, or at least its most influential early proponent, leading him to be referred to as the father of medicine, since his ideas laid the foundations for Western medical thought. The theory was further developed and expanded by Galen, who was a Roman physician and philosopher, since he added substantial detail to the understanding of the four humors and their impact on health and temperament. And what exactly was the impact of this theory? Well, for 2,000 years, it was believed that human health and personality were determined by the balance of four bodily fluids, each associated with different temperaments. And health was thought to hinge on this balance, since people believed that imbalances could cause disease and affect behavior, so treatments were aimed to restore balance through diet, herbs, and bloodletting. The theory of the four humors was a cornerstone of medicine until modern scientific advancements offered more precise understandings of health. So much so that according to an online exhibition presented by the National Library of Medicine titled Shakespeare and the Four Humors, William Shakespeare, who created characters that are among the richest and most humanly recognizable in all of literature, understood human personality in the terms available to his age. See, the theory of the four humors significantly influenced Shakespeare's work by providing a framework for his characters' personalities and motivations. Since Shakespeare integrated the characteristics associated with each humor into his characters, making them more complex and relatable, with each embodying the traits associated with one of the humors. For examples, example 1. Sanguine for blood was associated with the element of air and characterized by an optimistic, social, and cheerful disposition, like Mercutio from Romeo and Juliet, a character who is lively, talkative, and generally possesses a positive outlook. Or Rosalind from the play As You Like It, since Rosalind's cheerful nature, resilience, and ability to navigate her exile with grace and humor showcase her sanguine temperament. She's clever, sociable, and optimistic, even in challenging circumstances. Example 2. Choleric for yellow bile was linked to the element of fire and characterized by ambition, energy, and a propensity for anger or aggression, like King Lear from the play King Lear, which embodies this humor with his quick temper and impulsive decisions. Or Petruchio from the play The Taming of the Shrew, where Petruchio displays choleric characteristics through his determination and boldness in taming Caterina. His assertive and dominating behavior in pursuit of his goals shows the leadership and sometimes aggressive nature of the choleric temperament. And even Hotspur, known as Henry Percy from Henry IV, Part 1, who is fiery, impulsive, and honor-driven, often acting on his emotions without much thought. His quick temper and eagerness for battle make him a classic example of a choleric personality. Example 3. Melancholic for black bile was associated with the element of earth, characterized by introspection, melancholy, and a thoughtful demeanor. Hamlet from the play Hamlet is a prime example, as he is brooding, reflective, and consumed by existential and moral dilemmas. Or Ophelia from Hamlet, who exhibits signs of a melancholic temperament, especially as her storyline progresses. Her deep emotional pain, leading to her eventual madness and death, reflects the darker aspects of melancholy. And Jacques, from the play As You Like It, is another character who embodies melancholic traits. He is best known for his contemplative speech on the 7 ages of man, showcasing his philosophical and somewhat cynical outlook on life. And finally, example 4, phlegmatic or phlegm, which was linked to the element of water and characterized by calmness, reliability, and a laid-back attitude like Horatio in the play Hamlet, who represents this humor by being rational, loyal, and steady, often serving as a foil to Hamlet's melancholic and erratic nature. Or the Duke of Venice in the play Othello, since he demonstrates phlegmatic qualities through his measured and diplomatic handling of the crisis between Brabantio and Othello, where he listens calmly to both sides and seeks a rational solution to the conflict. These characters illustrate how Shakespeare utilized the concept of the 4 humors to craft personalities that were complex and aligned with the medical and psychological beliefs of his time. This use of the humors in Shakespeare's comedies and tragedies also allowed him to explore human nature and emotion in a way that resonated with the beliefs and understanding of his audience at the time to produce the core passions of anger, grief, hope, and fear. But, as stated in the 2015 book titled Measures of Personality and Social Psychological Constructs, there is no evidence that any of these ideas is accurate, and the ancient Greeks themselves did not do any empirical research to find out whether the levels of these bodily humors were actually related to personality characteristics. Nevertheless, the idea of the 4 humors or temperaments remained popular during medieval times and was influential even in the modern era. For example, one researcher who tried to interpret his own observations in terms of the 4 temperaments was Ivan Pavlov, the famous Russian physiologist and psychologist of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Although Pavlov is famous chiefly for his discovery of classical conditioning, he was also interested in temperament. In observing the dogs of his laboratory, Pavlov suggested that there were 4 basic kinds of temperaments in those dogs, and he believed that there were parallels between dogs and people. Pavlov did not try to study these 4 temperament types in people, but in recent decades, some researchers have done so, developing self-report questionnaire scales for this purpose. So, even though the theory of the 4 humors does not directly link to scurvy in terms of modern medical understanding, historically, the way people thought about and treated scurvy was heavily influenced by humorism, as we just learnt about. So treatments in the 18th century would have been aimed at restoring humor balance based on people's understanding at the time, rather than addressing the underlying deficiency, which we now know to be a vitamin C deficiency. And this was until sailors themselves discovered that consuming citrus fruits like lemons and limes could ward off scurvy. But at the time, they could not understand why, since vitamins were not discovered until the 20th century. So, there was a small glimmer of hope, except, to compound matters during that time, the cats and dogs on ships were perfectly healthy even though they ate no fruit or vegetables, which to the sailors seemed to point away from diet as the cause of scurvy. So exactly why was the health of the cats and dogs aboard ships relevant to the sailors? Well, to answer this question, we must first understand why these animals were on board the ships. See, during the Age of Sail, cats and dogs were commonly taken aboard ships for several practical reasons, with each reason playing a unique role in the life and operation of a sailing vessel at the time. This is because cats were primarily valued for their ability to control the rodent population on ships. See, rats and mice on board ships were high risk and posed significant problems for sailors on long voyages, since these pests could spread disease, consume or contaminate the ship's food supplies, and damage ropes and woodwork. So cats, being the natural hunters they are, helped to keep the rats and mice populations in check, which protected the crew's health and the integrity of the ship's stores and equipment. While dogs, on the other hand, served a variety of roles. See, some dogs were kept as mascots or companions, which boosted the morale of the crew on long and often isolating journeys. Other dogs had more functional roles, such as guard dogs, and they protected the ship, the crew, and the cargo from threats both at sea when the ship sailed or was anchored, and also when the ship was docked. Certain breeds of dogs were also trained to perform tasks such as assist in hunting when the ship was near land and retrieve items that fell overboard. The impact and relevance of cats and dogs on board were significant, since these unique animals contributed greatly to the health and well-being of the crew by controlling pests, providing companionship, and offering additional security. So see, the cats and dogs on board ships during the Age of Sail were not just pets. In fact, they were essential crew members that played critical roles in the day-to-day operations and the overall success of maritime expeditions during the Age of Sail. Hence, the importance of the status of their health to the sailors. The Science History Institute's article on the age of scurvy states the following. During the later period of the year 1739, England and Spain declared war to determine control of the Caribbean. Admiral George Anson, a British captain who had recently returned from the West Indies, was put in charge of a 6-ship mission to the Pacific coast of South America, which was an area of importance to Spanish trade. In an official portrait, Anson's round face, pursed lips, and feminine curls makes him look more like a grandmother than a ship's captain. But if Anson's countenance was placid, the task that lay ahead of him was far from pleasant. First, he was to aggravate the Spaniards as much as possible by attacking vulnerable Spanish towns and destroying or capturing any Spanish ships he could find. Second, he was to track down and capture one of the Spanish treasure galleons that transported silver from Acapulco to Manila in the Philippines. Such a ship was so valuable, it was known as the prize of all the oceans. So, Anson began his preparations for the voyage in February of the year 1740, but problems arose from the start. See, the ships assigned to Anson needed to be repaired and refitted for his mission, a task that would take months. The bigger challenge, however, was finding sailors, since the Royal Navy was snatching up for military service all the able-bodied men it could find, often through press gangs like the one Thomas Urequot encountered in 1808. Anson's mission was low on the Navy's priority list, and even the press gangs could not supply him with a sufficient crew. This was because Admiral Anson was supposed to sail with 2,000 men, but by July of the year 1740, he was still a couple hundred short. So, the Royal Navy, eager to make room for wounded sailors from the war, eventually came up with both a clever and horrifying solution, which was to empty out a hospital that was home to war veterans who were so old, wounded, crippled, or mentally unsound that they could no longer serve in marching regiments. This was the Chelsea Hospital, to be exact. And what made things worse was that the recruits who were relatively healthy did something quite rational, which was upon their release from the hospital, they simply walked away. As Anson's chaplain, Richard Walter, later wrote in the voyage's official account, this left behind only such as were literally invalids, most of them being 60 years of age, and some of them upwards of 70. To make up for the 240-odd quasi-competent invalids from an initial 500 who had limped off, the Navy supplied Anson with 210 young Marines, who were so inexperienced and untrained, wrote Walter, that they had never even been permitted to fire their guns. After some 6 months of preparation and months without access to fresh fruits and vegetables, since they had to survive on ship rations while they waited to depart, the 6 ships and their ragtag crew finally set sail in September. Already weakened by some combination of age, sickness, war wounds, and malnourishment, Anson's crew was likely terrified of what lay ahead, since they were tasked with spending years at sea, while deliberately seeking out conflict wherever they could find it. But what they should have feared the most was not Spanish warships, but what sailors at the time called the scurvy. Aware of that risk, the Navy issued Anson's crew several of the most popular treatments of the day. These included vinegar, an elixir of vitriol, which was a mixture of sulfuric acid and alcohol, and a patent medicine called Ward's Drop and Pill, which was less known for its curative abilities and more for its laxative effects. While all the treatments were universally unpleasant, none of them did a single thing to prevent scurvy. So, as the months wore on, the men's vulnerability increased. Then after, the disease hit at the worst possible time, just when the ships were rounding Cape Horn, which is a turbulent stretch of ocean at the tip of South America. See, on March 7th, during the year 1741, after the squadron had passed successfully through the straits that were considered the boundary between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, Walter optimistically reported that we could not help flattering ourselves that the greatest difficulty of our passage was now at the end.
The sky was clear. The weather was calm,
and the men's spirits were high. But their optimism was unfounded, because March 7th was, says Walter, the last cheerful day that the greatest part of us would ever live to enjoy. Because suddenly the sky blackened and the winds shifted. As the ships were pushed off course, the water began to churn with waves so mountainous that if one had broken over a ship, wrote Walter, it would in all probability have sent us to the bottom. The southern hemisphere's autumn storms had begun, and once they started, they raged for months. It rained. It snowed. It hailed. Men got frostbite. In a moment that haunted witnesses for years, one of Anson's best sailors was tossed into the water and continued to swim strongly alongside the ship, his comrades watching helplessly until he was finally lost in the waves. Much of the mainsail of Anson's ship, the Centurion, was blown overboard. The ship itself was so damaged by the buffeting waves that it leaked water at every seam. These storms lasted for an inconceivable 3 months. By the time the weather finally broke in late May, 2 of Anson's ships had given up and turned back, and the remainder had been separated, unaware of whether the other ships had survived. The hospital pensioners and most of the young Marines were dead. The storms were a horrific challenge, but scurvy proved even more destructive than the gales. At the latter end of April, there were but a few on board who were not in some degree afflicted with it, wrote Walter, and in that month, no less than 43 died of it on board the Centurion. In May, that number doubled. As the number of men above deck dwindled, the scene below grew ever worse. There were sick men with open sores and rotting wounds, swaying in tightly packed hammocks above a sloshing, rat-infested floor. Victims developed discolored spots all over their bodies. Their legs swelled, and if they exerted themselves in even the tiniest degree, or were simply moved by someone else, they were apt to swoon and die immediately. When they did, they often remained right where they were, since the remaining crew was too weak to throw their bodies overboard. This disease, so frequently attending long voyages and so particularly destructive to us, is surely the most singular and unaccountable of any that afflicts the human body, Walter later wrote. It did things that he admitted sound scarcely credible. One dying sailor, who had been wounded 50 years earlier, watched in horror as his wounds broke out afresh and appeared as if they had never been healed. Later, the callus of a broken bone, which had been completely formed for a long time, was found to be hereby dissolved, and the fracture seemed as if it had never been consolidated. Anson and his subordinates had agreed that in case they were separated, they would rendezvous at Juan Fernandez Island, a buccaneer hideout located several hundred miles off the Chilean coast due west of Santiago. Despite sickness and storms, the Centurion finally reached the island in June and was eventually joined by the expedition's 2 remaining ships, the Gloucester and the appropriately named Trial. By that point, the Centurion had only 70 men who were well enough to sail. The Gloucester and the Trial had each lost more than half of their crews, mostly to scurvy. Out of the 1,200 or so men who would have originally been on the 3 ships, only 335 men had survived. Recovery took time. To our great mortification, wrote Walter, it was nearly 20 days after their landing before the mortality was tolerably ceased. And for the first 10 or 12 days, we buried rarely less than 6 each day. And many of those who survived recovered by very slow and insensible degrees. Luckily, Juan Fernandez Island turned out to be a veritable paradise, with acres of oats and clover, turnips and radishes, wild cresses and sorrel, many of which are high in vitamin C. They also found a multitude of fish, including sea crayfish that Walter insisted weighed up to 8 or 9 pounds apiece. Anson was so giddy over the abundance of fresh food and crayfish dinners that he unpacked a stash of seeds he'd brought from home and planted them for future visitors to enjoy, such as lettuces, carrots, and the pits from peaches, apricots, and plums. The men stayed on the island for 3 months. After nursing themselves back to health, Anson and his men spent several months tooling around the South American coast, attacking Spanish towns and ships and managing, while close to land, to eat enough produce to keep scurvy at bay. There seemed to be a general acceptance among seafarers that fresh produce was helpful, though no one knew why. But the disease resurfaced during their Pacific crossing in the summer of the year 1742, killing up to 5 sailors a day. In mid-August, they were forced to abandon the Gloucester because there were not enough men available to repair it. See, after transferring the sick onto the Centurion, the remainder of the sailors got wickedly drunk off the officer's liquor cabinet and then torched the abandoned ship. Nonetheless, Anson somehow made it to Canton, now Guangzhou in China. There, despite the fact that his total crew, including new recruits, numbered only 227 people, Anson decided to try for his mission's second goal, which was finding and ambushing a Spanish treasure ship. In a nearly unbelievable stroke of luck, the gamble paid off, because on June 20th, during the year 1743, Anson captured a treasure galleon. In a dramatic contrast to the numbers he'd lost to scurvy, only 3 of his men died in the fight. But, despite the horrendous loss of life during Anson's voyage, the British Navy considered the venture a success. So, Anson returned to England a rich and celebrated man, and was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty in the year 1751. But, despite his power and title, Admiral Anson never lost sight of the price of his success, because, as stated in the U.S. Naval Institute's article titled "Finding the Cure for Scurvy," of the 1,854 men who set out with Anson, only 188 men made it home alive after returning from the 4-year circumnavigation. Midshipman and future Admiral Augustus Keppel was also one of the lucky survivors at the cost of all his hair and teeth. When hearing of such gruesome accounts, it's difficult not to want to travel back in time, grab these men by the shoulders and beg them to eat some lemons, oranges, or any of the many other foods that contain vitamin C. However, this would not even have been a new idea, because one of the strangest things about the history of scurvy and the many other vitamin deficiency diseases is that people kept figuring out cures and then completely forgetting about them. For examples, in the year 1535, the French explorer Jacques Cartier reported that after his ships had become locked in ice in the St. Lawrence River, his men were saved from scurvy by a special tea prepared by local Native Americans from the bark and leaves of a particular tree. In the 1500s and the 1600s, several ship captains suggested there might be a connection between fruits, vegetables, and scurvy. In the year 1734, a Dutch physician named Johannes Bakstrom came up with the term antiscorbutic, which means without scurvy, and used it to describe fresh vegetables, and he became the first person who was known to suggest that scurvy might be a deficiency disease. Even Anson made a point of loading up on oranges whenever possible, and his chaplain, Walter, praised Juan Fernandez Island for having almost all the vegetables which are usually esteemed to be particularly adapted to the cure of those scorbutic disorders which are contracted by salt diet and long voyages. So, even though no one knew the cause of scurvy or what about these various foods made them antiscorbutic, many mariners recognized a connection between their diets and their health. But it was only until one young Scotsman rose to the challenge. He was a Royal Navy surgeon named James Lind, who read the accounts of Anson's voyage with horror and set out to find a cure. He started by surveying the existing literature and noted several clues that pointed toward diet. As we just learned, seamen had long known that eating green vegetation could ward off scurvy. See, when Anson's men started to exhibit the first symptoms of the disease during his passage around Cape Horn, he made his way to the fertile island of Juan Fernandez, where his men gorged on a plant called scurvy grass. And early explorers in North America noticed that Native Americans who were confined to a diet of dried meat during the winter supplemented it with a tea made from pine needles. Lind also rediscovered the observations from a century earlier of a Surgeon General of the East India Company named John Woodall, who noted that citrus fruit, especially lemons, had a dramatic effect on patients. But Lind was not alone in searching for a cure. Supposed remedies were offered by individuals ranging from respected men of science to dangerous crackpots. But perhaps most bizarre was the idea that drinking seawater could cure the disease. And the Navy Board, which always had an eye on controlling costs, eagerly endorsed this last proposal to have the sailors drink seawater. Clearly, objective research was required, and Lind took a truly groundbreaking approach to the problem. So what exactly did James Lind do? Well, As stated in a 2010 article of the National Center for Biotechnology Information's Scientific Journal, which is published by the National Library of Medicine, Dr. James Lind, whilst working as a surgeon for the British Royal Navy aboard the HMS Salisbury in the year 1747, became appalled by the high mortality of scurvy among sailors. So much so that he was steadfastly determined to find a remedy at the time and planned a comparative trial of the most promising cure for scurvy. See, 2 months after the ship set sail and while it was at sea, scurvy began to appear among the crew. So, when Dr. Lind had 12 scurvy patients who were all suffering with similar symptoms, he divided them into pairs. The 12 patients were housed together and received the same care, the same food, and the same drink, except Dr. Lind changed the possible treatment they were administered for scurvy. The first pair was given cider. The second pair was given elixir vitriol. The third pair was given vinegar. The fourth pair was given seawater. The fifth pair was given a paste of plant extracts made by a hospital surgeon. And the sixth and final pair was given 2 oranges and a lemon each day. Remarkably, Dr. Lind noted that those given oranges and lemons showed the most rapid improvement, with 1 patient fit for duty after 6 days. So, the result of the trial was conclusive because only the men who were given citrus fruit made a rapid and immediate recovery. This achievement resulted in Dr. Lind being considered the first physician of the modern era to have conducted a controlled clinical trial, and that too aboard the HMS Salisbury while it was at sea. His findings, detailed in his treatise on scurvy in the year 1753, is published online at the James Lind Library to showcase his work, which highlights the effectiveness of citrus fruits in treating scurvy. In his treatise on scurvy, Dr. Lind writes in an early form of modern English these words: "The subject of the following sheets is of great importance to this nation, the most powerful in her fleets, and the most flourishing in her commerce of any in the world. Armies have been supposed to lose more of their men by sickness than by the sword. But this observation has been much more verified in our fleets and squadrons, where the scurvy alone during the last war proved a more destructive enemy and cut off more valuable lives than the united efforts of the French and Spanish arms. It has not only occasionally committed surprising in ships and fleets, but almost affects the constitution of sailors, and where it does not rise to any visible calamity, yet it often makes a powerful addition to the malignity of other diseases. It is now above 150 years since the great sea officer Sir Peter Hawkins, in his observations made in a voyage to the South Sea, remarked it to be the pestilence of that element. He was able, in the course of 20 years, in which he has been employed at sea, to give an account of 10,000 mariners destroyed by it. But I flatter myself that it will appear from the following treatise that the calamity may be prevented, and the danger of this destructive evil obviated, nor is there any question but every attempt to put a stop to so consuming a plague will meet with a favorable reception from the public. It is a subject in which all practitioners of physic are highly interested, for it will be found that the mischief is not confined to the sea, but is extended particularly to armies at land, and is an endemic evil in many parts of the world. This disease for above a century has been the supposed scourge of Europe, but how much even the learned world stands in need of farther light in so dark a region of physic may appear from the late mournful story of the German troops in Hungary, the disaster in Thorn, and from many other reactions in this treatise. What gave occasion to my attempting this work is briefly as follows. After the publication of the Right Honourable Lord Anson's Voyage by the Reverend Mr. Walter, the lively, elegant picture there exhibited of the distress occasioned by this disease, which afflicted the crews of that noble, brave, and experienced commander, in his passage round the world, excited the curiosity of many to inquire into the nature of a malady accompanied with such extraordinary appearances. It was acknowledged that the best descriptions of it are met with the accounts of voyages, but it was regretted that those were the productions of only seamen, and that no physician conversant with disease at sea had undertaken to throw light upon the subject and clear it from the obscurity under which it has lain in the works of physicians who practised only at land. Some time afterwards, the Society of Surgeons of the Royal Navy published their laudable plan for improving medical knowledge by the labours of its several members, who have opportunities of inspecting nature and examining diseases under the varied influence of different climate, seasons, and soils. I then wrote a paper on the scurvy with a design of having it published by them. It appeared to me a subject worthy of the strictest inquiry, and I was led upon this occasion to consult several authors who had treated of the disease, where I perceived mistakes which have been attended in practice with dangerous and fatal consequences. There appeared to me an evident necessity of rectifying those errors, on account of the pernicious effects they have already visibly produced. But as it is no easy matter to root out old prejudices, or to overturn opinions which have acquired and established by time, custom, and great authorities, it became therefore requisite for this purpose to exhibit a full and impartial view of what was hitherto been published on the scurvy, and that in a chronological order, by which the sources of those mistakes may be detected. Indeed, before this subject could be set in a clear and proper light, it was necessary to remove a great deal of rubbish. Thus, what was first intended as a short paper to be published in the Memoirs of our Medical Navy Society has now swelled to a volume not altogether suitable to the plan and institution of that laudable and learned body. I cannot, however, upon this occasion, omit acknowledging with gratitude the many excellent practical observations I have been favoured with by some of its most worthy members, especially by the ingenious Mr. Ives of Goffport, and Mr. John Murray, an eminent surgeon at Wells in Norfolk. Notwithstanding which advantages, I am sensible of many inaccuracies and imperfections in this performance. They are perhaps the more numerous, as it has been sent to the press sooner than was at first intended. There are, however, two things that may appear exceptionable, which I ought here to particularly mention. The first is the plan of work. I am sorry to find myself under a necessity of offering what some of my readers may think very indifferent entertainment, and that at their setting out in the critical chapters of the first part. But it was not easy to fall upon a method equally adapted to all readers, nor indeed is the arrangement of the several chapters a matter of any great importance. The order here followed is that in which it ought to be perused by physicians and men of learning, who have made this disease their study, and are previously acquainted with the former writings upon it. It was necessary, in order to prevail with some of these gentlemen, to peruse the second part with less prejudice against me, to endeavour first to remove such objections as might arise from doctrines imbibed in younger years in schools and universities. Others who are not so well acquainted with the subject, I would advise with the second part, which will enable them to form a better judgment of the first. The Bibliotheca Scorbutica, or the collection of the authors on the scurvy, is placed at the latter end of the book, as proper to be consulted in the dictionary way. Dr. James Lind goes on to write the following. In orders of the chapters, the prevention of the disease precedes its cure, and the first being the most material, I have thrown great part of the latter into it, this method of treating scurvy suiting it better than perhaps any other. It will appear that in the plan I have pursued, I had in view an author whose book has met with a general good reception, and were other diseases treated in like manner, it would greatly abridge the enormous and still increasing number of books in our science. So who was this author referenced by Dr. Lind? Well, the author was a French physician and biblical scholar named Jean Astruc, who made significant contributions to venereology by distinguishing syphilis from gonorrhea, and he wrote a book to highlight his foundational work on venereal diseases. Dr. Lind goes on to write the following. Where I have been necessarily led, in this disagreeable part of the work, to criticize the sentiments of eminent and learned authors, I have not done it with a malignant view of depreciating their labors or their names, but from a regard to truth and to the good of mankind. I have indeed, through the whole, aimed at perspicuity rather than elegance of diction as most proper in a book of science. To know a disease and to cure it, being the two things most essential to be learned. The James Lind Library also contains an interesting advertisement titled Vitamin C on the High Seas from Pfizer, the American multinational pharmaceutical and biotechnology corporation, which, according to the Pfizer ad, has been manufacturing chemists since the year 1849. This particular ad includes information on the British Navy's use of lime juice for scurvy, and also a note for the term limeys, which we will learn about later. However, despite the success of his clinical trial, Dr. Lind hesitated to recommend the use of oranges and lemons due to cost, and also because the true cause of scurvy was not fully understood at the time. So scurvy continued to plague sailors and explorers well into the 19th century. Can you guess how long? According to the Royal Museum's Greenwich article titled "What is Scurvy?", it took 42 years after Lind published his findings for lemon juice to be officially issued by the British Royal Navy as a cure for scurvy. So, how and why did the British Navy decide to adopt citrus fruits as a cure for scurvy, you may wonder? Well, in the late 18th century, a Scottish naval physician named Sir Gilbert Blane, who worked in the British Royal Navy, advocated for reforms aimed at preventing diseases like scurvy among sailors. In fact, he significantly improved the British Royal Navy's health by advocating for the consumption of citrus fruits to prevent scurvy by implementing medical reforms, conducting research, and also promoting preventative medicine. His efforts reduced disease outbreaks, enhanced sailor health, and established him as a leader in naval medicine since he proposed measures such as improved ventilation, sanitation, diet aboard ships, and the establishment of naval hospitals, which helped enhance the quality of the medical care provided to sailors. His book, called Observations on the Diseases of Seamen, can be found online at gutenberg.org for anyone interested in learning more about it. I will share part of his book in my next episode 3, part 1b, which gives us a glimpse into food on ships during the Age of Sail. In his book, Sir Gilbert Blane writes, "Every person who has beheld with attention and feeling the tedious and languishing series of suffering which the sick and recovering endure for want of the means of supporting and recruiting their strength and spirits, must wish that those who preside in the civil department of the Navy would seriously consider this subject and complete the reform that has already begun." Sir Gilbert Blane's work led to the effective prevention of scurvy, which gave Britain a strategic advantage during conflicts like the Napoleonic War, as described in the National Library of Medicine's journal article on the evolution of clinical research, a history before and beyond James Lind. And, according to the Journal of the Royal Naval Medical Service, which, since 2019, has been published by the peer-reviewed journal BMJ Military Health, Sir Gilbert Blane served as Commissioner on the Sick and Wounded Board of Admiralty during his career to improve the living conditions and health of sailors, which brought him national recognition and honors since his work contributed to significant reductions in sickness rates. But, despite this breakthrough, the understanding of vitamins and their role in preventing diseases like scurvy was slow to develop, and the knowledge of scurvy's cure was lost and rediscovered multiple times throughout history. Dr. Lind's pioneering work, outlined in his treatise on scurvy, laid the foundation for modern clinical trials. His legacy lives on through the James Lind Library, which was established in the year 2003 to promote fair testing of treatments. And Since Dr. Lin's trial was initiated on May 20th in the year 1747, it led to May 20th being designated as a celebration for International Clinical Trials Day in honor of his groundbreaking trial, since his work led to our modern-day clinical trials. Today, we understand that scurvy is caused by a deficiency of vitamin C, which is essential for collagen production and overall health. The story of scurvy and its cure with citrus fruits highlights the complex journey of scientific discovery and the importance of nutrition in maintaining health and preventing disease. Imagine the high vitamin C content of limes and lemons made them invaluable for maintaining the health of sailors, which significantly impacted maritime exploration so that they could travel across the seas and oceans to discover new lands, cultures, resources, and also understand the world better. Emphasizing how much limes and lemons impacted humanity's naval power at the time. Yes, naval power. See, the invention of the ship was a significant technological innovation which enabled major advancement in the human ability to travel, trade, and explore lands across water bodies globally. Naval power fundamentally changed societies and economies worldwide, since nations became enabled to exert control and influence over the seas so that they could explore new territories, control vital trade routes, and expand their influence to fostering global connections. It makes sense that limes and lemons were called green gold, since historically these citrus fruits gave countries the ability to protect trade routes, explore new lands by connecting different parts of the world, promote cultural exchange, increase economic development, and enable global security and safe passage for commercial shipping from threats like piracy. However, it is important to acknowledge that this same naval power capability has been used throughout history to wage war, colonize foreign lands, and disrupt local populations and ecosystems. So, while ships have been crucial in enhancing certain aspects of global security, they have also been tools of conflict and dominance, sadly illustrating the dual nature of technological advancements, which results in both progress and challenges for us all. Throughout history, a combination of different types of technological advancements globally have transformed the lives of human beings in countless ways globally. Imagine, every facet of global human existence has continuously been reshaped, from revolutionizing communication
recent calls
and healthcare. transforming education. Transportation. And agriculture. Technological advancements have automated industries, redefined entertainment, conserved the environment, and altered social dynamics, while simultaneously being a fuel for progress and also presenting very complex challenges. Somehow, this omnipresent influence should prompt us to ponder, as technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace. How will it further change the human experience? Are we prepared for the future it's shaping? For example, technological advancements have transformed healthcare, communication, and access to information, enriching billions of lives. However, they also pose risks like privacy breaches and environmental harm. Understanding this duality is crucial for responsibly harnessing technology and also ensuring it benefits society while minimizing any negative impacts we do not want. Consider the Internet. It connects us globally, yet also introduces data security and misinformation issues. Each invention highlights the need for thoughtful use of the invented technology, which can bring both incredible benefits and new complex challenges for us to address. So, in the case of the lime and the lemon, the ability to preserve food and enhance flavors greatly increased their value. It's fascinating that beyond the health benefits and in an era before modern refrigeration and global trade, these citrus fruits were rare and highly sought after, both for their economic benefits and for their life-saving properties, making limes and lemons as precious as gold. Talk about a historical power-up. It is quite interesting, though, how this practice of consuming limes highlighted the importance of vitamins long before they were fully understood. And, in the year 1795, the British Royal Navy officially adopted the practice of issuing lemon juice, right after recognizing its benefits in preventing scurvy, as pointed out by Sir Gilbert Blaine's work. But by the early 19th century, they replaced most of the lemons with limes that were sourced from British colonies located in the West Indies. Except when the British Navy switched from using lemons to limes, the limes were primarily sourced with a focus on convenience and cost, so no one realized that limes contain significantly less vitamin C than lemons because people had no clue about the crucial difference between the nutritional profiles of limes and lemons, since vitamin C was not even discovered yet. So imagine, these British sailors and servicemen were already facing issues such as diseases, piracy, and harsh working conditions, and on top of that, they still had to deal with long voyages and this major threat of the deadly scurvy disease. Additionally, the era was compounded by the fact that no one knew that the vitamin C content in limes degrades faster than lemons, especially when limes are not freshly squeezed. So this caused lime juice to be less effective than lemon juice, which was a stronger defense against scurvy at the time. And Dr. James Linn's selection of treatments was based on the common theories of disease at the time. However, it is his work that laid the foundation for understanding the prevention of disease through diet, and became foundational to the field of nutritional science, including the development of modern clinical trials. Why did no one in those times know this information about limes and lemons, you may wonder? Well, when the British Navy chose to use limes instead of lemons, it was during a time when decisions were made based on the best available empirical research findings. From the year 1795 onward, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice per day was mandated to be given to every sailor serving throughout the Royal Navy, nearly banishing scurvy at a stroke. Sir Blaine ordered lemon juice be mixed into grog to guarantee its consumption, but the measure came with considerable logistical challenges. See, in the year 1804, for example, the Navy Board had to source 50,000 gallons of lemon juice, which typically came from the Spanish fruit. But Britain was at war with Spain at the time. As a result, the Navy Board switched to using lime juice, which could be obtained from British possessions in the Caribbean. According to the U.S. Navy's Institute's article on finding the cure for scurvy, other navies were slow to adopt similar measures. Some, such as the French, were daunted by the cost and logistical challenges involved in supplying such enormous amounts of fruit, while others, with a ready source of lemons, such as Spain, had a prohibition on giving alcohol to their sailors, which made Blaine's preservation method unacceptable. Still, others viewed the British Royal Navy's practice as bizarre. In the War of 1812, U.S. sailors ridiculed them by calling them limeys, the origin of the term still in use today. It's quite fascinating how such a little fruit has such a massive global impact. So much so that in the Caribbean island of Trinidad and Tobago, the word lime is used as both a verb and a noun. See, the history of liming in Trinidad is deeply intertwined with the island's cultural and social fabric, though the origins of the activity are not documented in a precise historical context. Fun fact is that in the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, liming, or locally termed limin, refers to the art of hanging out or socializing in an informal, relaxed setting, often with no set agenda other than enjoying people's company. Limin, or to lime, is a deeply ingrained part of the culture, embodying the local ethos of community and leisure. Liming can happen anywhere, on the beach, at a bar, at someone's home, or even just at a street corner. When someone or a group of people go to lime, the activity often involves food, drinks, music, and lively conversation. And although there are several theories about the term's origin, one popular theory suggests that the term liming evolved to describe social relaxation and hanging out derived from the practice of British sailors who used lime juice to prevent scurvy, which led to social gatherings involving drinking and camaraderie. Initially, the term limeys for the British Navy may have been derogatory, but it has since become a historical reflection of Britain's global influence through its navy, highlighting British naval health practices and maritime strength, which refers to anything related to the sea, including navigation, shipping, and the overall activities and culture associated with the ocean and waterways. Today, we live in a world where limes are a key ingredient in certain types of pickles and chutneys, and the juice from limes is so versatile that lime juice is often used to flavor drinks, foods, and confections, which refer to sweet foods, especially those that are rich in sugar, since the juice from limes can be dried, frozen, concentrated, and even canned. Today, we also live in a world filled with sugary items made with lime and lemon, such as candies, pastries, cakes, cookies, and even chocolate, which is something I only discovered while creating this episode, so I will need to try some dark chocolate made with fresh lime, since it seems to be a popular pairing in some countries. Do let me know in the comments if lime chocolate is something you have tried before and what you thought of it. Finally, thank you to my Portuguese language-speaking listener who informed me about his country's national drink called caipirinha. So I must share with you the story. See, caipirinha is the iconic national drink of Brazil, which is popular both within the country and also internationally for its refreshing and potent qualities. Some believed it was a farmer's refreshment in rural Brazil, though it is not quite clear. According to an article published by the tourism company G Adventures, which is a small group-escorted tour operator based in Canada, cachaça has been around in Brazil since the 1500s, but as to its invention, there are many theories around how the drink came to be, one of which suggests that a variation of the drink was used to help cure the Spanish flu epidemic in the early 20th century. The original recipe likely contained garlic, honey, lime, and other strong natural substances, which is a variation that is still used to this day to help cure the common cold. The preparation of caipirinha involves muddling lime wedges with sugar to extract the juice, including the essential oils from the lime peel. This is then mixed with cachaça, which is a Brazilian spirit distilled from sugarcane that can be clear in color when it is unaged to golden or amber when it is aged. The drink is then topped off with ice. Over time, caipirinha transitioned from a local remedy and a local refreshment to being deeply celebrated as an emblem of Brazilian culture to stand out as Brazil's national cocktail, which is celebrated worldwide for its refreshing taste and connection to Brazilian heritage. The result is a sweet, tangy, and strong beverage that's often enjoyed during festive occasions and social gatherings. So, while Brazil already enjoys a rich diversity of regional and traditional drinks, the caipirinha highlights the lime's tangy zest, balanced by the sweetness of sugar and the distinct taste of cachaça, to create a vibrant and refreshing drink that celebrates the lively essence of lime, also known as humanity's green gold. Wow, what a story to tell! And with that, we've come to the end of part 1A for this episode of the Lime and Lemon Legacy. But before I end, I will share a poem which is as unique as this story. Upon the vast and tumultuous sea, sailors braved a world where dangers flee. Amidst the waves and tempests wild, they faced a foe that left them beguiled. Scurvy, the silent killer, took its toll. Its grip on sailors a cruel, relentless roll. As months at sea stretched long and drear, its symptoms grew, its victims near. But in this darkness, two heroes stood. Their courage strong, their wills withstood. James Lind, a surgeon, bold and wise, saw suffering sailors with tear-filled eyes. With lime and lemon he sought a cure, to save the sailors, of that he was sure. Alongside him Gilbert Blaine did stand, a visionary mind with plans so grand. They harnessed nature's gifts, citrus bright, and banished scurvy's deadly blight. Preserved with spirits the fruit did last, a remedy found, a chapter past. Yet limes and lemons did not just heal, their impact on humanity did reveal a story of innovation, progress, and might, a tale of courage shining bright. For in their wake technology soared, as preservation methods were explored. From ship to shore, their influence spread as citrus fruits became widespread. Nutrition's importance, now understood, shaped the world, its future and its good. Lind and Blaine, their legacy grand, changed the course of history's hand. So, let us raise a toast, my friend, to Lind and Blaine, whose paths did bend. The arc of progress they did steer, with limes and lemons, bright and clear. The story of the fight against scurvy is not just a tale of overcoming a deadly disease, but a testament to the power of observation, scientific inquiry, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge against the odds. It highlights the transformative impact of addressing a ubiquitous problem through innovation, ultimately shaping the outcome of naval history and saving countless lives. This saga invites us to ponder the other scurvies of today, which awaits their own James Lind to step forward and inspire us to question, explore, and innovate for a better future. I hope you've enjoyed our deep dive so far into the world of limes and lemons. Join me next time for part 1B of this episode 3 as we continue to explore our fascinating world to discover the hidden stories of human culture through the zesty legacy of limes and lemons. So, share, subscribe, and follow me for a fresh perspective on global cultures and history, delivered with a meticulous sense of fun. It's learning, just different than you know it. Until then, keep learning, laughing, and savoring the sweetness of life.